Lovely tones from a little 18-watt custom.
Indeed.
Today I want to talk about some of the problems with liquid profiling.
Yeah.
And I want to go on record as saying I'm a big fan of liquid profiling.
Mm-hmm.
And I just as easily and maybe more accurately could have called this video the problems with people's perception of liquid profiling.
Okay.
Because I think the liquid profiling that Kemper's given us delivers on its promise. It's just that I think people greatly misunderstand the promise.
Okay, so how would you sum that up, that promise?
So let's get into this. So I think what the promise they've given us is we have modeled the controls and the effect that those controls have on an amp circuit. We've modeled that, and you can apply it to
on
a profile.
A specific amp.
That's what it is.
Okay.
And I've talked to them about this. Hey, how come it's not called a tone stack model? And Christoph said, because it has gain too, and a bright cap, and that's not part of the tone stack. That's really
more
part of the circuit. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. So we called it amp models, and I think that confuses people to a degree. But I got these two questions on YouTube, and so I want to put them up here because I think a lot of people have similar questions. Jim McDougall, 9973, who's a longtime watcher and fan, and always appreciates support. He said, "I must say, I'm rather confused by the need for so many profile snapshots, when surely one liquid profile should be able to cover all of the amp's tones. I suppose when you start adding different delays and effects, it needs different profiles, but so many when morphing is available?" There was another comment that said, this is from Tim Baffle, also a big watcher, big fan, appreciate support, love you guys. The comment by Jim McDougall is a great point and may deserve a Tone Junkie episode. Why so many profiles when we have liquid profiles?
Right.
Which I thought, that is a good question. Why so many profiles when we have liquid profiles? And so thank you guys for commenting on the video. I've actually been wanting to talk about this a bit more and kind of show what I've found with liquid profiles, what it really does and what it doesn't maybe do.
And as sort of like a clarification, if you don't know, the reason why you do so many profiles to begin with is the amp is going up in volume and you're getting more gain each profile as it goes up.
Also, it's called Tone Junkie, so more is more as a general feeling. Originally, why do packs have so many profiles? And the general thinking of the Kemper was people had this idea out there that the gain control didn't work accurately. And I would say that's too simplistic of a statement. The reason I do a lot of profiles is because when I started, everyone did a lot of profiles. It became the standard in the community to release packs with profiles of all these, all of these different gain ranges.
Yeah, you get like 30 or something profiles,
The actual manual describes that one of the beauties of the Kemper is to get the amp in the sweet spot. What is the sweet spot of an amplifier? Think of a deluxe reverb. And that's an amp that, to me, I've said this a lot, sounds better on 8 than on 10. Fenders, blackface Fenders, when you max them out, they get all flubby in the low end and stuff. And you don't really always want as much gain as maximum. Deluxe reverb sounds really good. Edge of breakup and kind of broken up. Gives that classic rock sound. It just sounds killer. Maybe you love your deluxe at 7 or 8. And boom, once it's in the sweet spot and you love the way it breaks up and you love the EQ and you love everything it's doing, now you have independent control over how much gain you have. The gain that happens in the sweet spot. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, because the amp hasn't changed.
The amp hasn't changed, but the Kemper can make any profile clean, all the way clean. If you bring any dirty profile all the way down to clean, it'll make it all the way clean. It almost like creates the clean and the dirty, it has the breakup and the clean tone of an amp. And you're sort of mixing between these two. I think of the gain control more like that. A real tube amp, the tube will distort in a mostly linear fashion, but not totally linear. So it's not just such that increasing the gain will result in the same behavior. And even less so when a bright cap is introduced. So a bright cap is put on guitar amplifiers to basically help your clean sounds sound kind of brighter and nice. And then your dirty sounds, it sort of rolls that off. How does it do that? And how can you hear a bright cap? Go on any amp that has a normal channel and a bright channel. The bright has a bright cap. The normal usually has nothing. Sometimes a normal channel will have a bright cap of a different value, but normally nothing. You go on an old Marshall, the reason that normal channel is so, just any Plexi, any Tone Junkie Plexi pack, if you want to listen to it, channel 2 or the normal channel will always be very dark and almost dull sounding. But when you really get it gained up, it's really warm, and Voxes are like this too. It's really warm. But the bright channel has extra high end. What's it doing? The bright cap is actually filtering out lows and mids, and it's allowing high end to pass through. The more you up the bright cap on the gain control, the less effect it has. So at 10 on even a bright channel, the bright cap's then doing nothing as you roll it up. But as you roll it down, it's filtering out more and more low end and mid range, and it's allowing the highs to come through. It's a bright cap. A popular mod on an amp like a Deluxe Reverb reissue is to actually go in and clip the bright cap. People think it's too bright and they don't like it. And so that's not the only place brightness comes from, but it's a very old design that was on late 40s Fenders, and it's still on amps today. And it's how we hear it. An amp with no bright cap is like that normal channel. You might go, oh, it's kind of dull. And so we as guitar players are very used to, when we turn down an amp, the brightness actually goes up.
Right.
That's what we sort of are used to hearing, and that's what designers of amps have given us, and we're all very used to that. What does that have to do with any of this? Well, the Kemper doesn't have the bright cap information. It doesn't know that when you turn down the gain, that bright cap is supposed to. It doesn't know if it's a 10 UF, a 5, a 500 this, a 600. It doesn't know what maker it was. It doesn't know anything about that capacitor. So when it rolls the gain back and forth, that's why I call it more of a mix control. It's just giving you dirtier or cleaner. I don't want to make the Kemper sound too simplistic, because they're very clear that there's sort of a deep recreation of the amp's breakup characteristic. But what I'm saying is this gain control is just generic. It doesn't know the gain. It doesn't know whether I put in a 5E3 and it's that bright cap, or whether it's a Marshall
and it's
the
same on every profile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the standard became, let's put a lot of these in. Well, what liquid profiling does is it says, hey guys, if you tell me what the amp is, I'll tell you what all those values are. I'll give you a tone stack that's accurate. I'll give you. So the Vox famously has low end, high end, cut. Bass, treble, cut. We get bass, middle, treble presence. So it's not controlling the EQ the same way. It's not controlling the gain the same way as an amplifier does. But liquid profiling says, if you tell me what amp and you tell me where you started, I can tell you what those controls would do on the real amp when you begin to change them. Meaning I can take your sound that you gave me, and if I know the starting point, I know what would happen on the Vox if you upped the treble just one more. I know what would happen if you cleaned it up, because I can reduce the gain, but I also can compensate for the bright cap because I know the value, because you told me what type of amp it is. Now that's where we get into, do we need many profiles or one?
Right.
There's 3 reasons that I would say why we would still need a lot of profiles. Because I think this does it well. Let me go. Before I get into this, let me go to a liquid profile here. Let's go to this Bandmaster liquid. Let's just see if this kind of behaves like we would think it would. This is probably going to be kind of dirty. There's no delay on it. And now I'm going to clean it up. Let's put it at like 3.5. I have this gain control, which is now saying it's functioning in the liquid fashion. It's compensating for some sort of a bright cap. So we hear it getting a lot brighter. We hear it getting dirtier. If I roll it back up, try that now. The gain also, the volume is still controlled by the Kemper, meaning the volume is still maxed out. It still is sort of looking at the peak. And we still have all the tools in the world if we want to control that. And if we don't, if we want to change the relationship between how loud a clean is to how loud a dirty is, we can still control that. This is now supposed to be giving us accurate, whatever. Do I think it does a good job of that? Yes, it does. Now let me tell you, here's the problem. There's 3 reasons why I would say you can't capture this amp in one profile and deliver it to people and say that's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing, yeah.
Do you have an accurate tone stack that feels like you have the amp and you can just do this and set it where you want it and manipulate this thing like a model or like an amp? Sure. But 2 reasons why. One is, first, the most obvious, this is not even a tone stack of a bandmaster.
Right, of this amp.
Yeah, we don't have one of this amp.
Yeah.
What we have is something similar to this amp. What we have is a Tweed Bassman, probably based on a 59 Bassman, or what they would call a 5F6.
Okay.
This is a 5E3. This is 1 year earlier.
5E7, right?
5E7, sorry. This is 1 year earlier and a different model. So it has a smaller transformer. It has less wattage. Now, it doesn't have this amp has no mid control, but this model does.
Right.
I don't know actually what the value of the bright cap on this is compared to a 59 Bassman. It might be slightly different.
Yeah.
So, do you have sort of an authentic experience of hearing these tones? Can we get dirty, overdriven, edge of breakup with just a liquid profile of this amp?
Sure.
I would say sure.
Yeah.
Would you get a sort of more authentic experience by playing with the tone controls here? Will it behave like a Tweed? Sure. But because we're not matching 1-to-1, because we don't have a liquid profile of every single amp.
It's almost like you're combining a Tweed Bassman and a Bandmaster.
Yeah, it almost becomes if someone took their old Bandmaster and added a mid control.
Right.
And they said, well, the mid control in a 5F6 work like this. And maybe they might have slightly modified the bright cap. I don't know. Let's see how different this is. I want to compare a liquid profile to a non-liquid profile. So let's go to my channel 1 of the Bandmaster. Here is 4. And what's my generic gain at? The gain is generic there. So 3.7 on the generic gain. Okay. So let's play this. Now I'm going to go back to the liquid profile of the same channel, and I'm going to say generic gain 3.7. So I've now made my liquid profile the exact same gain. Let's see if this sounds any different.
Really close.
It is really close. It is really close. Let's try this one again. What I just heard is the liquid seemed to have a little more bass. In this one, it seemed heftier, and this one seemed a little less hefty. Now, did either one sound bad?
No,
it didn't sound bad. I mean, they both sound good. Would I be worried if I only gave you one of those that I didn't get the breakup of the amp? I think they sounded pretty similar. I mean, the character of the breakup sounded very similar. It sounds like the same amp. To me, it sounded a little more bass in one, a little more bass in the other. That could have to do with the value of that bright cap. It could also have to do with this. Let's say this did have a Bandmaster 58 5E3 tone stack modeled and amp model in there. Let's say it was accurate, and we do have the amp. It's a Plexi. It's a
AC30. It's in there. Yeah.
Well, hang on a minute. This is a 58. Ask anybody who's had old amps that you don't get worked on for a long time. You just replace some tubes, and then you go have people replace caps. You go look in. Oh, this component's failing. This component's 50%. This component's 40%. This really needs a recap. The tubes are going, or this rectifier has been. You're using a preamp tube that, hey, this one's really hot, or hey, your phase inverter tube is really low, out of spec. It's real low. It's in the process of dying, which can take forever. It could take 6 months.
Right.
That amp will be different than another amp that was recently recapped 2 years ago or right after you get it. Whenever I get an old amp worked on, and Stu's told me he has the same experience, when you get an old amp worked on and usually get it recapped, in general, cleaner, louder, punchier. It's almost like the fidelity of the amps is what's degrading, you know? So who's to say that my amp, the caps are not beginning to fail?
Right, yeah.
The tubes are perfect. Who's to say that the potentiometer isn't going? Who's to say the bright cap isn't failing? The capacitors explode over time. All of that leads me to just go, no two amps are the same.
Yeah.
So slight differences in what's modeled here and between the real amp may be appreciable differences.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from what Kemper has made.
Yeah, and this would be the same critique of like modeling, for instance. Like you've modeled that AC30, but doesn't match the thousands of AC30s you could go buy. Yeah.
And where you see this really clearly is line 6 usually gives you one model of each amp. Here's our AC30. Now they give you a Fawn and a later AC30.
Sure.
They give you one Plexi, and then they also give you the Super Tremolo, some variation. But when you go look at Axe, you'll find the same amp, just 2 different years.
Yeah.
You'll find very similar. Is there maybe 3 50-watt Marshalls in there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's at least 2 I remember we were looking at.
And some have mods and some have like...
Yeah. And so sometimes the amplifier that was referenced in modeling is different than the amplifier in real life. So the same limitation, like you said, applies here. This amp might not be 100% like this thing.
Yeah.
And that can result in rolling that gain up, and all of a sudden we have more bass than we did in that one, because the bright cap value could be slightly different.
Yeah.
The tone stack could be slightly different. The overall just sound of the amp could be different. A rectifier tube, getting pushed harder, more and less headroom, the performance of that tube will determine compression and headroom. As that tube starts to go, or if you replaced it with a different tube or something, you'll experience more or less headroom in the amp. Mesa Boogie, sells tubes for Mesa Boogie amps and sort of tells you, buy our tubes and you don't need to rebias your amp. The reason is those tubes they sell have a very tight spec that they know this is our spec. If we put our name on it, we tested it, we discarded the other ones, those become Gen Lion and all the other brands, right?
Yeah.
And the Mesa Boogie ones are in this spec, and this is what we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So there's that difference. We may not have the right tone model. The amps vary wildly in just one amp to another.
Which one they used, yeah.
Especially the older you get.
Right.
A58 to A58 is going to be different. And then the last thing I would say is they have given us a Plexi tone model. They have given us an AC30, but I don't always know what that's referencing. Are we talking about a pre-1964 top non-top boost AC30, or are we talking about a top boosted AC30 from 64 or later? Or are we talking about, you know what I mean, that got more, maybe it was modded with a kit, or are we talking about when JMI sold the company and the next it gets sold to Dallas Arbiter, it gets sold? Are we talking about a 70s AC30 or an 80s AC30 from the Rose Morris era? So, and that question, that's all a bunch of geekery. But here's the question. Are we talking about the Edge's AC30? Are we talking about Noel Gallagher's AC30? Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
are we talking about David Hislop's AC30? Those are different AC30s. Now, I'm sure David has an old one. But I say that because famously, those guys have used 90s AC30s and used them on the road and stuff. And classic pairing is sort of that 90s AC30 and a Prosonic, right? Those are 3 very different AC30s. That the 90s one has completely different controls. It's not the same. The Rose Morris is significantly different.
Yeah.
The controls are different. They built in reverb. You just take an AC30 and go, here's my AC30 model. But I could have an old AC30 that was literally made by 5 different companies. Because in the history of a company like Vox,
it's a big range.
It's never been a company that manufactured amps. Vox has always been a company that paid someone to make amps for them and call them Voxes. They owned the circuits.
Yeah.
But JMI was the first company They went Rose Morris, Dallas Arbiter. There's another brand in there I'm forgetting. Then Korg bought them. They were made by Marshall in the Marshall factory. Now they're made in China by a contractor who is not Korg. Here we are. I have multiple plexis. The Kemper doesn't give us, here's a 50 watt, here's a 100 watt, here's a super tremolo, here's a this, here's a that. It doesn't give us, we took this spec from a specific amp, or did we look at the official spec that's published by Marshall? I'll tell you from owning a lot of old amps, the official spec and the real spec often do not match, especially when you get it. And that can be for days of production. It could be that one day, one of the amp booths had no more potentiometers of this thing. And so the guys just reached over and grabbed a different one. I one time ordered shelves from Amazon. Wrong shelf came. Sent it back. Ordered the right shelf again. Wrong one came. Sent it back. Lady said, I'll replace it for you. I said, ma'am, I'm just letting you know. The problem is at the warehouse. There's a spot on the floor that says it's the...
They're all mislabeled.
Yes. It says it's the large shelf. And every time I order it, you guys are scanning it as large shelf, but the small shelf is showing up.
There's a big chance the third one will be wrong too.
Yes, the robots don't double check. No, you know what I'm saying? They're someone put the wrong sticker on.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's the kind of stuff that, is really goes on in the real world. Real amps have a lot of variance. Digital amps don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the idea of algorithmically perfect, which is Neural's thing, right?
Yeah.
Algorithmically perfect.
That's funny.
This is a super geeky topic and super heady. What's the point? Does any of this matter?
I mean, to the original question, was, instead of giving me 30 profiles, give me one and let me move it all around to make these 30 sounds.
And the answer to that is, do we need all these profiles? And I would say this. We do not need them. If you want the sound of an amp, I could give you one liquid profile and I could tell you, this is a very accurate representation of that amp and owning that amp.
And you could move it around with the controls and explore and do all the stuff. Yeah.
Is it the most accurate of owning my actual amp? Maybe less so.
Because it sounds like every time you make a change on a liquid profile, you might be going away from your amp.
It could be.
As opposed to if you just went up from 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, that actually was your amp.
That
getting louder and louder.
Amp, yes. Does the Kemper capture things perfectly? Nothing is perfect. Everything captures amps minus some amount of fidelity, minus some little difference.
Little degrees.
There's always something different, right? Do little changes to the values of components in this amp change? Do speakers differ from one to the other? Does the microphone position change the sound? Does the outboard gear I use change the sound? Yes. All of those change the sound. But we wouldn't look at those things and say that somehow, because the sound is affected, it decreases the accuracy. So I would still make the case that liquid profiling being accurate is doing less to change your sound from the original than any of those things I just mentioned.
Yeah, right.
All of those things could have a much more profound,
than the difference between a liquid and a non-liquid.
You can hear when a tube is going out. And the crazy thing about your tubes going out on your tube amp is if you play that thing all the time, the sound is changing slowly as it's fading. And it's like getting new glasses. You don't notice that your vision is a little fuzzy out there until you put on the new glasses and you go, whoa, this is sharper.
Yeah.
You didn't notice because it happened so slowly. When I retube any amp, not any amp, sometimes they're fine, but sometimes you retube an amp, especially preamp tubes. You change that V1 just with another JJ. And it could be the tube's a little different. It could be it's up to the proper spec. And all of a sudden you go, oh, the amp's brighter. Oh, it's punchier. But it's a difference you didn't realize had slowly faded.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you put on new strings. You go, whoa.
Yeah.
You hear the difference.
Yeah. I like this guitar now.
But there was not a moment where you're like, I can hear the strings are 80%.
Yeah.
I can hear they're 70.
They have 3 more weeks left. Yeah.
It just slowly changes. So I think the effect liquid profiles has on the original profile. And by the way, the original profile at where I have it is unchanged. If I give you a liquid profile and it's where I set it, it's unchanged.
Yeah.
And usually that is where I have it saved. sometimes I've been changing the gain just for fun. Because a couple of people told me your liquid profiles are clean. And I thought, well, I just saved them clean.
It could be anywhere.
I can make them dirty if you want.
Save them there.
It's up to you to move them.
It's probably the last place you played it.
It is exactly. Right. It's wherever I go back and put the effects in, and usually delays and reverbs, I would put it clean so I can hear the effects a little better.
I'll tell you what, man. Like my thing is, I like the liquid profiling. I use it more for the tone. Like I use it on Voxes because I like that cut control.
Yes,
I
agree.
I hardly ever touch the gain. If I want more gain, I go back to the numbered profiles.
Yeah.
If I'm on a 1-3 and I like it and I want to go gainy, I'll go back to 1-5.
What's funny about that is you might be playing a profile that I saved with the Vox amp straight up and down because originally I thought, where do I put this? I'll put it right in the middle.
Right.
But I probably profiled it on like 8.
Yeah.
So like
Could be a mental thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just so used to that don't touch the gain knob type of thing, you know?
Yeah. Cycle through kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's always been my thing is like I hardly ever touch the gain even before.
Yeah.
Like I would rather go from 2-4 to 2-1 to go clean than to go to the gain knob, you know? Because it's like, and that's the thing about the Kemper is like, I love this piece of gear because it feels like I have all these amps. Because I've heard in here, like going back and forth, it's like, there's no difference. If I had that amp, that's how I would sound recording with it.
So close. Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm so attached to that on those numbered profiles. But the liquid thing, I think that it's only going to get better too. The more models they add, the more they improve it. You know?
Right. The more models they add, the less this complaint, or not even complaint, the less it's an issue that there's variance.
For sure.
Me as a profiler, what do I do for that 18 watt Marshall? There's no 18 watt in there.
Yeah.
I could make it like an AC15 and now it has a cool cut knob and that's useful.
Yeah.
But I could also make it like a Plexi because it was a Marshall. But it's not that.
Yeah.
So
you have to choose. Yeah.
You got to choose. It's a give and take. So why do I put so many in? I think that liquid profiling provides a really fun, accurate experience to be able to experience an amp. I won't, because of what we talked about, I'm not sure I can give it to you and it's 100% this exact amp.
Right.
So because of that, I still like profiling things the old way, just the traditional way. And then when liquids are there, I try to, when there's an opportunity to make a liquid profile, I definitely want to take it.
Yeah.
And even if there's not an opportunity to make a liquid profile, I maybe want to create something as close to something cool as I can.
Yeah, just to have more options to play with. Yeah.
And sometimes, and I haven't named all the packs liquid, but they've all been liquid since liquid came out. Like there's been liquid profiles in every pack, even if it's not labeled liquid. Someone said to me, how come you don't make liquid packs? I'm like, they've all been liquid.
All of them have them.
They're Kemper packs.
They're in there. Yeah.
I'm using all of all, you know. I don't label the new reverbs.
Right.
I don't go with new reverbs.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm probably building something.
You're going to hear them. Yeah.
So really it's just been, this is how I've enjoyed the Kemper and.
Yeah, it makes sense, man.
And
I'm glad to have all the options. Like I love seeing like 30 or 40 profiles. It's like, cool. Let's like go through all these. That's fun,
and I still, even with liquid profiles, I try to, it doesn't model the microphone. So like in this pack, in the Bandmaster pack, or in most of the packs, I've been doing liquids with different microphones. Because then it's like, here's the amp as though you could control it and hear it through these mics, through these mics, through these mics. So there's still variation. I don't want people to think I'm doing it just to add fluff. If I wouldn't do it if I thought that. And if I want variation, I can add variation via microphones. It's not harder.
A great option.
You know. But I'm putting it in there because I think they're cool. Yeah. I think it's cool, and I think it's awesome.
Profile of the world, man.
Dude,
like,
profile of the world.
Give me all the profiles.
And everything in it. So I hope dudes, the guys who answer the question, I hope that answers the question why I do it. It's always a question of what do you need versus what you want. And obviously, I'm not limiting myself in most areas of my life to what do I need.
More is more.
More is more, man. More is more.
If you're new to the channel, more is more.
Just more is more. Yeah. You know, and we're enthusiasts, man.
Yeah.
Do you only have as much whiskey as you need?
I don't want to talk about it. Or guitars or amps. Wow.
All right. Sooze, we've talked. How long did I talk for? This could have been a podcast. Sooze, play us out on this. This is 1-4. You want to go this way?
Yeah.
All right. There's a delay. How?
What's the blue thing do? Nice.
Play us out, Sooze. I've been HW.
I've been Sooze.